Good evening, everyone. Um, I'm here in Orlando at Disney, and we are in the bubble at the moment. I've got my Mickey Mouse wristband here, so I'm able to go different places inside the bubble. Yeah. So here we are. We're in Orlando at Disney, inside of the bubble, in the hotel room, as you can see. And I'm sure, a lot of people have heard now that, I have a very specific goal of, the reason why I've decided to come to Orlando and participate in the restart of this NBA season. Yeah, and obviously committed to that, and not only by, I guess the actions of, the words that I've said, I guess, but also by actions and by continuing to do so while I'm here in the bubble. So sitting in my room in the bubble. And I guess the tough part is, the good part is that obviously I've found my reason and I've found my purpose, and I guess I wanted to kickstart my mission here inside of the bubble, by being able to put myself in a vulnerable situation, which I never do because of the way that I've been raised, by my parents, by my family. But I think to kick off my mission and why I've come to Orlando is to start by putting myself in a vulnerable situation, that obviously I'm not used to, for good reasons. But I think this is the way to be able to share my personal experiences on racism and to start by that. And this is not for anyone to feel sorry for me. This is not what this is about. This is for two reasons. This is to hopefully influence other people, so that it can give them confidence, so that they can share their own personal experiences and they feel comfortable in doing so, and sharing whatever they feel comfortable in sharing. Because this right here will be the best form of education, for those that need to hear it. So as heavy as it might seem for those to hear certain things, it's good for those people to also understand that it's even worse for people like myself and obviously others to say this stuff out loud, to actually talk about it, share those personal experiences. Because what's even worse than all of that combined is the fact that we are the ones that had to live it and continuing to live with it. So it's traumatic. It's those personal experiences um, that live with you for the rest of your life. Um, so I guess to start, and for context as well, which I think is very important. Um, I was asked a question the other day. I was asked a question the other day in an interview, um, and the question was, when I say racism in Australia to you, what was it like? How did it impact you growing up? So I guess let me start there by giving a little context, and I guess I'll share with what I'm comfortable with at the moment. Um, as a lot of it is heavy, um, but I think it's important to point out first of all, to answer the question is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are known as black people in Australia. Always has, and obviously always will be. So for me, growing up in Australia, I've been called black everything under the sun, as well as abo, darky, blackie, petrol sniffer, monkey, chimp. Um, but for whatever reason, the worst one out of the lot for me was being called a black. Now, it was unfortunately a constant for me that I just had to get used to it, and for no real other reason than other people not knowing how to support me in that moment growing up. Um, but as my mum always said, um, don't even give them any notice. Just walk away. Just walk away. Um, but black people is how, black is how um, we were referred to and what we are referred to, um, you know, way back when. The history of Australia, when it comes to black Australians, with slavery, segregation, black people weren't allowed to vote, black people weren't allowed to stay in certain hotels, movie theaters, pubs, buses. But even if you were allowed in those places, you were only allowed in a tiny section of those places, movie theaters, for example. Um, Black people were only allowed unskilled labor jobs, or dangerous jobs. For example, working on railway lines, in the mines, on sheep or cattle stations. Women were domestic servants, and men were put on, for example, pearling lugger boats and made to go deep sea diving with helmets, air compressors, with no skill, or no legit safe diving equipment. And on top of all of that, getting paid obviously way less than the fellow white workmates. And for the most part, the bank accounts for those black people were controlled by the government, by the Australian government. So I guess in those couple of examples to start, I'm sure I'm sure my American friends watching can draw some parallels from these events that happened in Australia only 50 years ago. And on top of all of those things, and obviously there's a lot more, but on top of those examples that I just mentioned, you also had the stolen generation, where black children were physically removed from the arms of their families by the Australian government and put into an environment where they were forced to grow up and learn the ways of the white society or white ways of Australia. You weren't allowed to act, you weren't allowed to behave as a black child, you weren't allowed to speak your own language, no cultural practices, no ceremonies at sacred sites, nothing. Your whole identity as a kid and everything you know about your culture and everything that you were brought up around is about to be wiped clean, or at least attempted to. And from that point on, you're essentially only allowed to be and act as a white person. And that's the stolen generation of Australia. As this relates to me, and as I said, this is probably the beginning of who I am and a massive part of my identity today. Is that my mum, along with her brothers and her sisters, was forcibly removed from the arms of her family at a very young age by policemen and by officers. Just think about that for a second. I know a lot of people who are watching this right now have kids, grandkids, or at least hoping to have kids one day. So for those that do, just imagine that for a second. These strong white policemen and officers come into your home, physically ripping your children out of your arms as you're trying to hold on to them and taking them away. You might have multiple children and you're holding on to one of them while the other little ones are sitting over there, and boom, taken, never seen again. I don't have kids right now, but you mums and dads do. So just if you can imagine that, coming into your home and having them ripped out of your arms to be taken away and and never seen again. Under the Aborigines Act 1911 in South Australia, my mum, my aunties, my uncles were all taken away by these officers, shoved into a room, locked into a room, and then they were all split up and separated from each other and spread out into different other places, away from each other. There was a chief protector of every state. And that chief protector, under that Aborigines Act 1911 in South Australia, was the legal guardian of every black kid in the state. And that chief protector was not only the legal guardian of those kids in the state, but also the head of the Department of Native Affairs. So basically, whatever was said by this chief protector goes. And there was not one thing that anyone could do about it. So, throughout my mum's experience of being taken away, she was constantly told that her mother, my grandmother, she was constantly told that she didn't want anything to do with you. That's why she gave you away. She never loved you. So you're better off here, safe, with us. We'll take care of you. Just imagine now as the child, as the kid, and you're being told that your mother gave you away because she didn't want anything to do with you. She didn't love you. An attempt of a complete brainwash and another attempt to wipe out a whole race. A country that once was populated by 100% black Australians, now today, July 2020, a dwindling number below 3%. 3% below. So after Mum was told all of these lies about her mum not wanting anything to do with her, did she come to find out later in life that her mum had actually constantly been writing letter after letter after letter almost every day to the chief protector, asking for her children, begging for her children back. What does it got to take to get my children back? So my mum, my aunties and my uncles, although now at this point in their life, now in foster care with white families, were known as wards of the state until they turned 18. So they were known as wards of the state until they turned 18 years old. And now guess what? After going through all of that trauma for that many years, after going through all of that, you now turn 18, you're now no longer a ward of the state, and now you have to enter the real world as young black people. So if that wasn't enough of being treated whatever word you want to use for that treatment, now you're about to enter the real world. I, I have a vivid memory growing up. Um, Being taught bits and pieces of this information at a young age. Obviously, at that age, I'm not really understanding any of it, but it was around the age of when I began to notice that I actually did look different to a lot of other people. So, I don't know, 5, 6 years old, maybe a little bit older, I'm not sure. But it was young because I just come to notice and realize that, yeah, I did look different than that person over there or that friend over there. My parents started to no, my parents picked up on the fact that I would always point out the black football player on TV or the black basketball player on TV or the black athlete in the newspaper. So they started to pick up that I was gravitating towards these black athletes that I saw. Although there was not many to choose from, they were the ones that I was glued to the whole time. But I remember vividly one day we were driving home. It was just me, mum, and dad. I'm in the back seat, sitting directly behind mum. Dad's driving, right hand side drive. Remember, so passenger seat's on the left, and I'm sitting directly behind mum. And this specific drive home, for whatever reason, mum and dad are telling me bits and pieces about mum being taken away, and other black people being taken away from their families. And I'm sitting in the back. I'm not really saying anything because I guess I'm trying really hard to understand. Super young, remember. Anyway, we pull up to the house, and they're still talking about it. I remember opening the door first to jump out, because I was already standing there as mum was opening her door, getting out of the car. And as she was getting out of the car, I remember like looking down at my arms and looking down at the back of my palms. And I asked mum. I said, "Mum, does that mean that they're gonna come and take me away too?" And I mean, I remember like it was yesterday. She said, "No, Dal." She calls me Dal. "No, Dal. Dad's gonna stand on that big rock over there with a big stick and make sure no one comes near here." So, I mean, I'm however old I am now, and just thinking about, what it must have been like for my mum to hear me say, or me to ask the question, um, Mum, so does that mean they're gonna come take me away too? And she didn't she didn't even flinch, she didn't budge, she just said, "No, doll, Dad's just gonna stand on that big rock there with a big stick and make sure no one comes near here." And I said, "Okay." No, because it sounded like a good plan to me, and I just walked in the house. Um, but just to think about, like, that kind of stuff can happen just because of the color of your skin. So I guess that's the start of the this is the start of the shield that I had to build. And my mom and dad were the ones that helped me build the shield because of what they both went through. Just hurdle after hurdle. And the part that I'll never understand is how how my mum, how can someone be so strong, like that type of strength, like to go through all that, and then to go through this next part with me that I'm about to go through as a young black kid in an environment where, yeah. So this will be the next part now, but that's just the start. That's just the context. I guess the backstory about my upbringing now, and what I went through growing up. which is going to be tough to tell too, in a way.